Hello, everyone. So, I just want to talk about another book that I've read. So, review a book, and this is called The Invisible Muslim Journeys Through Whiteness and Islam by Medina Tenour Whiteman. So, this is a book that, first of all, I've got to say, I love the cover. So I'll tell you a little bit about Medina Tenour Whiteman. So she's a writer, poet, translator, and musician. She writes poetry and she lives near Granada, Spain, with her husband and three children. And what it says from the blur from the cover here, Medina Tenour Whiteman stands at the margins of whiteness and Islam. An Anglo-American born to Sufi converts, she feels perennially out of place, not fully at home in Western or Muslim cultures. And she unearths experiences familiar to both Western Muslims and anyone of mixed heritage, a lifelong search for belonging and the joys and crises of inhabiting more than one identity. So Medina Tenour Whiteman is actually a lady who is born into a Muslim family of Anglo-American sort of Sufi reverts. And these are people that became Muslims back in the 60s and 70s when people were searching for all sorts of different ideas. You know, it makes you think of the Beatles going to India and all that kind of thing. Well, her parents got explored Sufism and took up Islam, and Medina was brought up in a nice English village, and has this kind of mixed Anglo-American heritage. So I've got to say, first of all, I love the cover because it's got a kind of bland building, and then you've got suddenly got this kind of lit building with these kind of arches, which I suppose kind of signify the kind of Islamic idea of being somebody that's slightly out of place and slightly exotic, and you know. And I think that's just a fantastic cover. I've just got to say, I absolutely love the cover. And the title is really interesting. The Invisible Muslim Journeys Through Whiteness and Islam. So she is, for all intents and purposes, white, and she is somebody who is a Muslim and practices that. And it's about her journeys throughout, through different places in the world. So she travels to, Andalusia, where she lives now in Spain, Bosnia, Turkey, Iran, India, Zanzibar. I think she's in Zambia and was it Zambia and Zambia, Tanzania, and Kenya. So I mean, but you know, she says herself that these are travels that have been over a couple of decades. Um, First of all, I've got to say it's really well written, and sometimes it feels like a travel book. Other times it's like a memoir. Other times it feels like a history book, and sometimes it feels as if it's a real. It's a book of commenting on current affairs in modern day Britain. So you kind of it kind of changes, but it's always nicely written. And somebody did say that maybe she's got a kind of ear for rhythm and things because she's a musician. I don't know whether that's true, but certainly I really enjoyed reading this book. She made a few comments about Britain which I'd written down, and which I actually which resonated with me. And she talked about modern day Britain, that Britain to me is about not judging a book by its cover, but having the curiosity to open it and the attentiveness to read. And that made a bit of an impression on me, because I think modern Britain is a country that is full of all sorts of diverse strands in it now that we weren't maybe so aware of maybe even 20 years ago or 25 years ago. She described something called adab, which I had actually written down here. So I want to just read that to you, and it tells me something about Britain as well. She says, in a secular world that sucks its teeth at the idea of God, it can be hard to communicate these ideas to non-Muslims. But if there is one Islamic value that can be universalized, and that could be a powerful antidote to privilege, it's adab. Generally, adab is taken to mean good manners, but it's much more than just minding your P's and Q's. Adab implies behaving with respect and consideration in all situations. It means not scrolling on your phone while others sit uncomfortably in the shadow of your self-involvement. It means thinking through all the ramifications of one's behaviour to preempt injustice. Adab is a white person centering the perspectives of people of colour on issues of race, or a man deferring to a woman on feminism. Having adab in worship means not fidgeting, keeping prayer spaces clean and beautiful, trying to clear the mind of chatter and the heart of ugliness. Adab towards the natural world is treating the earth's resources with care and consideration for future needs. Adab could also be translated as decency or humanness, or perhaps more accurately, as mindfulness, not in the modern sense of meditation, but of thoughtful and ethical behaviour. To European sensibilities, adab isn't a remotely alien concept. I see in it a certain kind of Britishness, in the culture of doing one's civic duty and picking up rubbish from a beach, of minding one's own business, or debating sensitive topics respectfully. It's a Christian woman sitting contemplatively through a zikr gathering at my parents' house, even voluntarily donning a headscarf and joining us to pray. Practicing adab forces a person to confront the tyrannical ego which lies at the heart of every human problem I can think of. You can't practice adab towards people, animals, or the planet while exploiting or abusing them. So anyway, I really like that explanation of adab, and I think it's interesting that it's describing a central concept in Islam, which I also recognise in British life. This idea of that you are more than just you. You have a responsibility towards the society you live in, and you have a responsibility to make sure that they're being looked after as well. This was, I mean, basically, there's so much to unpack in this identity, and I did write a few ideas here. That not so much to unpack in this book, not least of which is the authors coming to terms with their own sense of identity. And as someone who already has multiple strands of identity that she does her best to own, as well as her own religious identity. And that's set in with her own journey as a woman being brought up in a village, having to deal with peer pressure and having to deal with just coming to terms with what it means to be a young woman, which is something that obviously I had to sort of really think about. What else did I say about this? I mean, there was an interesting thing here that I thought I had some thoughts about. It's her attempts to find belonging and not remain as the other, and perhaps in the end, we simply have to accept that part of us is never going to feel that we truly belong. Perhaps family, and she has her own now, is where we really have to start, no matter what racial or religious background we come from. So for me, this was just like the ideas of what it means to be a Muslim is something that I've had to deal with all my life in Britain. But the idea of being a white Muslim suddenly brings another idea to it. And she does talk about how she's married now to somebody who comes from Iran, and how she talks about this idea of white privilege now. White privilege is something, or the idea of being white is something I think has been probably covered in loads of other books already, probably in much more detail than this. But it did make me think about how she feels that she herself normally is not even aware of it until she gets to an airport, and then she talks about how she's able to switch identities and just take her headscarf off and breeze through immigration, and it isn't a problem. But then she then her sense of outrage gets activated when she sees how her husband is stopped, and maybe questioned and for longer, or even our children. So, she's somebody who's definitely got a sense of history and reads about historical ideas and historical injustice, and she feels that that possibly does contribute to it. And interestingly, she now lives in Granada, which is one of the last places in Europe where Muslims lived historically. They were literally expelled out of there in 1492. Granada fell. It was the last Muslim stronghold of Spain, and she now lives there. And so she's always kind of got this sense of her Muslim identity in Europe, which is, and I think there's something to be, there's a lot in this for our for to maybe look at in terms of relations in modern day Europe as well. And I do think about the refugee crisis and how refugees are being treated differently coming out of Ukraine, and refugees that were coming out of Syria. So anyway, I think there's a lot in this that that is, like I said, it's very well written. She talks about her journeys all over the world, like Tanzania and Africa, and there's something very different about all of that. And it is very much a personal journey. Like I said, she talks about her own coming to terms and coming of age, stories, living in a British village, which are the same as everybody else, I guess. Yeah, a really good book. A lot to unpack in this book, a lot to read. Like I said, very well written, I thought. And I must admit, initially I found it a wee bit slow going for me, but I think it was because she was talking about time in Zambia and Tanzania, and I wasn't particularly interested in that part of her life. But then, she talked about how about a lot of contemporary issues in Britain and then other parts of the world that I was a bit more familiar with, and I found that quite interesting. And like I said, there's bits of it that read like a history book, other parts that read like comments on Britain, modern day Britain, and then there's her own life that she talks about, which is again very interesting. So, The Invisible Muslim: Journeys Through Whiteness and Islam by Medina, Tenour, Whiteman. I thought it was quite an interesting book, and just put a spotlight on just identity, religious, racial identity, and just what it means like to be sitting there between different kind of cultural ideas. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you might be interested in getting this. Okay, thank you.